Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another session, and this is Ravi in front of you once more. And we have an interesting session in store for you today, but to drive the best out of this session, I would expect you to watch this till the end, because what we're going to talk about is something which is very important in the context of the entire set of exams that we have in front of us, be it the SBI PO or the IBPS PO and even the RBI Grade B. And you talk about the context of the general awareness, banking awareness, financial awareness, or economic awareness, whatever you may call that, things put together. But it forms a very important part of the exam. Iska weightage exam mein काफी important hai. And not only that, how you prepare for this section can actually determine how well prepared you are for the next stage, which is your personality round, wherein you have your interviews and you have to showcase that you know stuff well. So this section is important not just from scoring perspective, because इसमें return on marks का जो फंडा है ना बहुत ही ज़्यादा है, because if you know this, then the amount of time that you spend on a particular question as far as this particular section is concerned is negligible as compared to some of the other sections, which is where return on marks in this section can be phenomenal if you are someone who is basically clued into this particular subject or clued into this particular session. Now the context is, ये clued in का क्या मतलब होता है, ये हम बात करेंगे over the course of the next several slides. So that's very important. Now what I'm going to talk about also in today's session is to look at some of the trends that have emerged over the last couple of years in terms of how the exam itself is evolving with the context of this particular section. How is the exam evolving with the context of general awareness and your economic, banking or financial awareness? That is something we're going to analyze using some trends over the past couple of years. And we're going to specifically look at a couple of important exams in the context of SBI PO. We'll look at your IBPS PO, and we'll look at the SBI clerk for the previous year and how it was this year as well. So we will do some analysis in terms of how things have changed. Now, what the important thing I want to address here is that this is basically an image from a very famous best-selling book, which goes by the title, "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." And this is by a gentleman named Marshall Goldsmith. And essentially, if you look at this quote, what does it essentially say? Whatever you have done till now, or whatever you may have achieved till now, whatever successes that you've got, be it any exam or anything that you've done in life, that may be having a particular process that you actually followed. And maybe that process was successful and you ended up getting the results that you wanted. But it does not necessarily mean that if you have succeeded till now, you will always succeed going forward as well, right? Which means that if things change, we need to change ourselves as well to be able to move forward. Otherwise, we will actually fall back. Why will we fall back? Because the rest of the world is actually moving forward. आगे जनता बढ़ रही है. People are changing depending on how the exam is changing. Similarly, whatever you did so far in order to succeed in this particular section, be it your general awareness or banking or financial awareness, you maybe were following a particular template. But given the change in the way the exam is being looked at by the various recruiters, be it SBI, various banks in the IBPS as well, you have to relook at your strategy, you have to relook at your processes, because what got you success earlier with the kind of GA that used to appear earlier, the same process will not give you success right now because it has changed quite dramatically, right? That's what I wanted to basically highlight as far as this particular image is concerned. So one important thing that I wanted to basically highlight, and that's a misconception, is यार कुछ भी पूछ लेते हैं, मतलब they can basically ask anything under the sun. Yeah, the truth is, yes, they can ask anything under the sun. For example, this time in one of the questions it was asked, what is the minimum weight of the javelin used in the Olympics? Now the thought process there is, yeah, I mean, sounds a weird question, but if you think about it, it's not, because anyone in India would definitely know who won the gold medal in javelin, right? So what they're expecting is, do you know anything beyond that? Right? And there were several articles that got published immediately after the win in the gold medal about the science of how a javelin actually gets thrown. What is the weight of the javelin? What angle, what projectile motion should it actually go in? And a lot of things were analyzed. So what people are trying to see is, are you just looking at the basic information, or are you actually trying to understand and assimilate what exactly is happening around you? So the question is, are you just satisfied by knowing that Neeraj Chopra won the gold medal, or are you someone who wants to understand what exactly is javelin, how exactly was the sport evolving, and how exactly is a throw made, and how does it reach such a distance? All of those things basically indicate about how much you want to learn, and that is what was the indication. So technically, it is actually ask me anything, but the point is that Ask Me Anything has a method, right? There is specific things that they are trying to look at, And if you're able to play the game that they are trying to play and enjoy it at the same time, you will definitely be able to succeed. And that's very, very important to understand here, because if you get scared by that ask me anything wala context, कुछ भी पूछ सकते हैं, अगर वो fear factor आ जाएगा दिमाग में, then you will not be able to succeed at all. So it's important that you understand कि ask me anything में भी कुछ thought process है जिसकी वजह से वो आपको टेस्ट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. If you understand that thought process, if you understand that approach, you will be able to get results for yourself. And of course, hard work is definitely there, but if you want to get the best results for yourself, obviously you need to enjoy that process as well, right? Which is where play their game, but enjoy that game as well. Right. So moving on, what I want to highlight very quickly at this point is a very interesting connotation as to what exactly are the recruiters looking for whenever they are recruiting you as a probationary officer or even as a clerk for that matter, right? So firstly, the thing that gets tested is of course your aptitude. But beyond that, what you're looking at is they're trying to see whether this individual understands what is happening around him or her, right? Are you just trying to ratify things and just trying to answer one-liners in the exam? That's not what general awareness is all about. Now what they're really trying to test is कि actual general awareness क्या होता है? Are you aware of what is happening around you? What is going on in your surroundings, right? Not just from a national but also from an international perspective. Do you have an opinion on things? So that is where the trend is moving towards, which means that ये जो one-liners वाला trend था, while it still exists, ऐसा नहीं है कि वो completely निकल गया है, but that is something which is becoming less and less prevalent, and what is gaining prominence is questions which could be based on statements, questions which could be based on your understanding of the holistic news rather than the headlines alone. That becomes very important, right? And what are the recruiters at the end of the day looking for? Is this person curious enough to know more? And is this person capable of answering those questions and applying that knowledge as far as real life is concerned, right? And this has a very important correlation with your second round of the selection process as well, because that is what gets tested in your interviews. At the end of the day, आपको कुछ चीज आती है, and अगर वो आती है तो उसकी आपको समझ है कि नहीं? Do you understand it well enough? And if you're able to understand it well enough, are you able to explain it well enough to someone else and also look at the practical relevance of such things? Those are the things that the recruiters are looking for at this point in time. Those are the kind of candidates that the examiner wants or the recruiter wants. So the question that comes is, are you willing to put in the effort? जो मेहनत लगेगी इसमें, are you willing to put in that effort to become that prospective candidate or that prospective PO who not only understands what is going on around him or her, but also has the curiosity to know more and more and apply that knowledge into the day-to-day practical relevance of things? And if you prove yourself to be someone like that, then you are definitely going to succeed, not just in the exam, but also in the next stage, which is the personality development round as well, right? So keep that in mind. रिक्रूटर क्या चाहता है एंड रिक्रूटर के पर्सपेक्टिव से सोचना शुरू करो, बिकॉज अगर आप एग्जामिनर के थॉट प्रोसेस से सोचना शुरू करोगे, ऑटोमेटिकली आपके दिमाग में आएगा कि अगर मुझे पीओ रिक्रूट करना है, अगर मुझे क्लर्क रिक्रूट करना है, व्हाट इज द काइंड ऑफ कैंडिडेट वुड आई वांट एंड व्हाट वुड आई एक्सपेक्ट आउट ऑफ दिस कैंडिडेट, उसको क्या पता होना चाहिए, right? And accordingly the questions get framed, and that's a thought process that you should also work with, because that is what is going to help you to get into the mind of the examiner, think like the examiner and think कि किस type के questions आ सकते हैं, right? And that will help you in selecting the information and the news that you actually want to go in depth, right? So this is very important. Understand what the recruiter is expecting from you and prepare accordingly, right? So the next thing obviously that will come to your mind is, sir, is this doable? Given the amount of time that we have, number of months, roughly around 2 or maybe a little bit more, can this be achieved in that timeline, right? So it's definitely a question which would be bothering you at this point in time, because a lot needs to be done to prepare yourself for the upcoming exams, right? And the answer to that is just a single word, and that is absolutely and unequivocally yes. You can definitely do it. It's not a big deal. It's not rocket science. Easily manageable, provided you have two very critical things. One is consistency, which means that you've got to get regular at it, and second, you enjoy the process. Enjoy the learning rather than thinking of it as a burden. As long as you're doing these two things, you will be able to achieve tremendous, brilliant results, right? Now, what I want to address here also is from the context of answering a few basic questions for yourself, right? So and that is going to help you in preparing in terms of how you're going to approach this entire thing, right? So there's a famous gentleman called Simon Sinek who basically came up with the concept of a golden circle, and he asks you to answer the why. Why are you doing this, right? And once your answer to that why is very clear, WHY, then things become a lot easier for you in life, because you know the reason as to why you're doing a particular thing and what is the outcome that you're going to get out of it, and uski wajah se aapka motivation level काफी ऊपर रहता है. So same thing I ask you right now, what is it that you want from your life, right? Is it something that you look at yourself as someone who is mediocre and does not want to grow in life? Then of course this video is not meant for you. But if you're someone who's targeting to achieve big things in life, right, and the first stepping stone towards that is a probationary officer in one of the leading recruitment exams. Now the context is, if you're achieving that, that's just the first stepping stone. What after the PO, right? So after PO, you're looking at RBI, and then you look at other exams, growing up within RBI itself. There's so many other possibilities that are there for you, and the list is endless. There's tremendous opportunity that is waiting for you, and you just need to grab it with both hands. So what you need to answer yourself is, what is it that you're wanting from your life? Are you wanting to achieve something great? If you wanted to achieve something great, then trust me, you have to put in the efforts towards it. So it's important to answer that why for yourself, right? So once you have that answer to that why very clear, things will become very clear in terms of why you want to crack the GA section. And trust me, the answer is available on this slide, that it is not something which is only very short term. It's a very long term thing. If you're actually good at GA, it's going to help you in multiple things that you're achieving or trying to achieve in your life. So from that perspective, the decision that you need to take right now is, do I want to fight or do I want to flight? या तो मैं डट कर खड़े रहूं या फिर मैं भाग जाऊं. So these are the two options that are available from me, right? अगर डट के मुकाबला करना है, if I want to fight, then let's fight it while enjoying the process, because that will make it more fruitful. So that is the whole angle. So the decision is yours right now, fight or flight. If it's a flight, then you can as well leave the video right now and focus on other things in your life. But if it is fight, then there are interesting things in store for you as we proceed further. Next thing which is important is, the things are definitely changing, as I said, and we need to change as well. So mentally be prepared that the process has to change in terms of how you've been preparing for GA or BA, FA till now, and how you're going to be preparing for it going forward. So that is very, very important. So the process is changing because we have to attune yourself or ourselves to the change as well. Next thing that's important is, think long term. So when I talk about, let's say, a reasoning section or cracking quant, right? So all these have a limited shelf life, right? So once you've cleared an exam, or once you've cleared multiple exams, several aptitude exams, right? After that, the relevance of these things in day-to-day life is not that much, right? And the point is that overall, while aptitude and reasoning is a great skill to have because it just keeps you mentally active, the other important aspect is that when you talk about general awareness, right, or what are the things that are happening around you, if you're aware of those things, it not only helps in doing one very simple thing, which is to increase your confidence level significantly. Because when you're in conversations, when you're talking to people, आप दूसरों से बात कर रहे हो, and you're able to be part of those conversations, you're able to contribute meaningfully to those conversations, आप लोगों से अच्छे से बात कर पा रहे हो, आप converse कर पा रहे हो लोगों के साथ, then it automatically goes to highlight that you possess that knowledge. And once you possess that knowledge, it just gives you an adrenaline boost. आपको लगता है यार मुझे आता है. And once you get that feeling कि मुझे आता है, it significantly improves your confidence levels like anything, right? And वो एक तरह से क्या बोलते हैं? It's sort of a what do you say, adrenaline rush that you want to get again and again. So once you start having those interesting conversations with your boss, with your subordinates, with your friends, with your family, you start realizing that it is giving you great confidence and you want to learn more. So it starts a very positive cycle in your life. So once you're into that scheme of general awareness, or preparing for general awareness, or just being aware of what's happening around you, it just boosts your confidence immensely, right? And that just transforms your personality. And jitna bhi aap general awareness pe time spend kar rahe ho, the same thing is happening to your communication skills as well, your ability to come up with examples when you're having conversations with people. Even in descriptive writing, जो भी आप general awareness में सीख रहे हो, आप descriptive writing में भी वो चीज़ examples के form में use कर सकते हो. So it has a lot of advantages. So this confidence level increase is especially extremely relevant when you're talking about your interviews, or let's say having discussions when you're in a group. This level of confidence matters immensely. It can have a huge impact on your outcomes, right? On your results, because if you're aware, just think about how effectively you will be able to answer the questions, right? Aside from the fact that jitna bhi aap general awareness ke liye prepare kar rahe ho, you're actually reading, right? So it automatically is improving your communication and your English as well. So these are the skills that are going to help long term in your life and not just from a short term perspective, which is where the why now becomes very easy to answer कि भैया general awareness पे time क्यों spend करना है, time इसलिए spend करना है because it is going to help not just crack this particular section in the exam, it's going to help me in various kinds of group discussions, it's going to help me in my interviews, it's going to help me grow in my career, not just today but even 10 years from now, right? Which is where general awareness के साथ एक रिश्ता जोड़ लो, because that is what is going to help you achieve massive things in life, right? The next thing which I want to very clearly highlight to you guys is no shortcuts, please, right? ये मत पूछना कि सर इतना पीडीएफ करना काफी है क्या, या फिर एग्जाम के 4 दिन पहले तक का जीए करना काफी है क्या, सिर्फ 6 महीना करना काफी है क्या. लेट्स अवॉइड ऑल दोज क्वेश्चंस, राइट? बिकॉज एज सुन एज यू गेट इनटू दोज क्वेश्चंस कि सर सिर्फ ये वाला पीडीएफ करेंगे काफी है क्या, सिर्फ यहां तक पढ़ेंगे काफी है क्या, सो देन इट्स बेसिकली रेस्ट्रिक्टिंग योरसेल्फ टू अब्सॉर्ब मोर नॉलेज, right? And trust me, if you get out of that mode of rutification, or rather mugging up the concepts or things, and you concentrate on understanding things, you will be able to retain things a lot better, right? You understand things, assimilate things, and make your very very quick short notes, right? So no shortcuts please. करना है ढंग से करेंगे, but shortcuts फालतू में नहीं लगाएंगे, right? So as long as you're consistent, as long as you're enjoying the process, as long as you're putting in continuous efforts to understand things and then trying to assimilate and remember, it's very difficult for you to forget. And as I said, these are MCQs. You don't have to actually write the answers in the form of fill in the blanks. So from that perspective, अगर आपने थोड़ा सा भी अच्छे से समझा है, you will be able to recollect it in the exam. So that becomes very, very important. Now, the next thing that I want to basically talk about is that, yes, there is a lot of content to be covered, right? And it's very easy to hit the panic button, but that's not going to help you in any way, because it's only going to deter your preparation. So panic नहीं करना है, right? पढ़ना है और इंटेंट के साथ पढ़ना है, राइट? इंटेंट इन द सेंस कि एग्जाम में इसका रिलेवेंस क्या हो सकता है. आई स्टार्ट थिंकिंग फ्रॉम एन एग्जामिनर स्टैंड पॉइंट, इज दिस रेलेवेंट, इज दिस गोइंग टू एड वैल्यू, राइट? नाउ व्हेन आई से एड वैल्यू, नॉट जस्ट टू दी एग्जाम का पर्सपेक्टिव बट ऑल्सो टू योर ओन ग्रोथ पर्सपेक्टिव. इस इंफॉर्मेशन को पढ़ने से आपको क्या वैल्यू मिल रहा है, क्या ये इंटरव्यू में कंट्रीब्यूट करेगा? अगर ये इंटरव्यू में कंट्रीब्यूट करेगा तो देन आई वुड वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस, आई वुड वांट टू रिमेंबर दिस, राइट? एंड दैट बिकम्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. सो यू गो टू रीड, बट रीड विद इंटेंट. अब इसका मतलब क्या हुआ, आप पढ़ रहे हो बट आप कॉन्सेंट्रेशन के साथ पढ़ रहे हो, राइट? यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू लेट योर कॉन्सेंट्रेशन वेवर हियर एंड देयर, बट फोकसिंग एंटायरली ऑन द मटेरियल दैट इज इन फ्रंट ऑफ यू एंड कॉन्सेंट्रेटिंग ऑन assimilating and understanding as much as possible. So the next thing that we're talking about is not your emotional quotient, not your intelligence quotient, but the curiosity quotient, right? So जिस भी इंसान का CQ या curiosity quotient ज्यादा है, वो इंसान लाइफ में काफी ऊपर तक बढ़ सकता है. मैं क्यों बोल रहा हूं ऐसा? Because when you're curious, you want to know more. When you're knowing more, when you're learning more, automatically your chances to achieve big things in life also increase more. The context is, if your curiosity quotient is high, your learning will be high. If your learning is high, your skills will also improve. If your skills improve, your confidence levels will improve. If your confidence levels improve, you'll achieve great things in life, right? So that's a very, very positive circle that you can get into. So it's important to build your curiosity quotient. कोई भी चीज ऐसी अगर आप दिन में पढ़ते हो जिसमें आपको लगता है यार मेरे को समझ में नहीं आया, या इफ आई एम नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस, और बेसिकली यू फील दैट यू डोंट नो मच अबाउट इट, गूगल माई बाप तो है ही, राइट? And apart from that, we as faculty are also there to help you guys. The point is, try and understand it, try and assimilate it. Once you have that knowledge with you, it becomes very easy to kind of build on that knowledge and take it forward. I'll give you a very simple example. There was one question as to who is the chief economic advisor to the current prime minister, right? And the answer was, of course, your Krishnamurti Subramanian. Now the thing is, there is one aspect कि भाई Krishnamurti Subramanian is the answer. Now, do I have the curiosity to know more? अरे ये कौन है, मिस कृष्णमूर्ति साहब कौन है, क्या किया है इन्होंने लाइफ में? देन पता चलेगा कि भैया he was an IIT-IIM alumnus, then he's basically done research work at Chicago Booth as well, and his research faculty who's basically also looking at some of his research work is basically Dr. Raghuram Rajan, and he also is a Mr. Krishnamurti is also actually a faculty at in the academia as well. So there's a lot of information that you get to know about Mr. Krishnamurti. So that is the first time. So आपने मिस्टर कृष्णमूर्ति के बारे में पहली बार सुना, then you went and read these things. Now the idea is to follow up that news. What is the latest news on him? If you've been following what has happened yesterday and today, you realize that he is basically at the end of his term, he's given up his post of the chief economic advisor. So somebody else will take over his post and he's going to go back into academia. That completes the circle. So you started off with, भाई कृष्णमूर्ति सुब्रमण्यन कौन है? हाँ, चीफ इकोनॉमिक एडवाइजर हैं. देन उनके बारे में पता किया कि उनका बैकग्राउंड क्या है. ही हैज समथिंग इन कॉमन विद डॉक्टर रघुराम राजन, एक्स आरबीआई गवर्नर एज वेल, एंड ही इज इनटू एकेडमिया, एंड नाउ ही इज फाइनली basically given up the or stepped down from the post of the chief economic advisor as per the latest news. So the point is you've completed that full circle. एंड ये आप तभी करोगे जब आपके पास क्यूरियोसिटी होगी जानने के लिए कि कृष्णमूर्ति सुब्रमण्यन है कौन, राइट? बेसिक थॉट प्रोसेस क्या था अभी तक? अच्छा भाई, चीफ इकोनॉमिक एडवाइजर कौन है? कृष्णमूर्ति सुब्रमण्यम, फुल स्टॉप, खत्म बात, इसके आगे कुछ पढ़ना ही नहीं है अपने को. बट दैट इज अ वेरी रेस्ट्रिक्टिव माइंडसेट, बिकॉज उस माइंडसेट के साथ आप भले ही वो टर्म समझ पाओगे या भले ही उस इंसान का नाम जान पाओगे, उसका आपकी लाइफ में कोई यूटिलिटी ही नहीं रहेगा. विच इज वॉट दी रिक्रूटर इज ऑल्सो एक्सपेक्टिंग, कि आप सिर्फ नाम मत जानो, आप समझो क्या चीज है, वॉट एग्जैक्टली इज दिस, राइट? एंड दैट इज वॉट दी रिक्रूटर इज ऑल्सो एक्सपेक्टिंग, एंड दैट इज वेयर जनरल अवेयरनेस कम्स इन. आर यू जनरली अवेयर ऑफ वॉट आर द थिंग्स दैट आर हैपनिंग अराउंड यू? एंड दैट इज वॉट इज रिक्वायर्ड एट दिस पॉइंट इन टाइम to go in depth analyzing what exactly is the news all about and spend time on it. And it has to become a part of your DNA, right? So when I say DNA, आपको हर न्यूज़ में बेसिकली टाइम स्पेंड करना है, समझना है कि क्या है. एंड इफ यू आर जस्ट not able to understand, Google it. You'll definitely find enough. There's actually information overload at this point in time, wherein you can get access to any information that you want. So if there's anything that you don't understand, information is readily available. If not, we are readily available to help you guys out. So ensure that you get this into your DNA. Make it a routine that you have to improve your curiosity quotient. Anything that you come across that you do not know, spend time on understanding it, spend time on knowing more about it, and spend time on being able to talk about it. Because just knowing about it is not enough, right? जब तक आप किसी को articulate करके बोल नहीं सकते कि आपने क्या सीखा है, what is the point of that learning, right? So make sure that you're spending some time on articulating it also, right? When I say articulate, या तो आप लिख के articulate करो या फिर बोल के articulate करो, but उससे ये भी फायदा होगा कि एक तरह से आप रिवाइज भी कर रहे हो जो भी आपने पढ़ा है, you're in a way revising that also. So articulation becomes a very important way of remembering things. So make it a part, as I said. It has to be consistent. It has to be a process where you enjoy yourself and make it a part of your daily routine. That is something which is an absolute requirement. If you start doing these things, automatically things will start showing a positive impact, not just in your preparation for the exam, but also in your personality. Right, for the next bit, I'll basically move myself away from the screen and we'll now look at some of the basic elements की क्या हुआ है पिछले 1-2 सालों में. So for that, I'll move myself away from the screen. Right. So let's try and look at it now. Firstly, are direct questions coming? Right? So the answer is yes, direct questions abhi bhi aa rahe hain. It's not as if it has stopped completely. But the point is the devil is in the details. Right? So for example, when I talk about indices, right? So for example, there was a financial inclusion index that came about recently. So it's not only important to know that there is a financial inclusion index and what is the latest value of that financial inclusion index. What also matters for you to understand is what are the parameters in that index, right? Now for example, अगर global hunger index निकल रहा है या फिर rich list निकल रहा है, so you not only look at the ranking of the Indians, but also who are the top 3 and let's say who are the let's say few ranks above India, few ranks below India. Those things become important. So whenever you have a lot of short forms given in any kind of information that you see, you have to build your curiosity quotient and ask यार इसका full form क्या है? What exactly does it mean? So those things become important. So not only is the headline important, of course headline is the most important thing, but apart from the headlines, it's also important to look at the subtext of a headline. So basically जो headline के नीचे जो 2-3 लाइनें रहती हैं, that also becomes important. But not only is the subtext important, but you also need to look at the individual paragraphs and look at important information that you can gather from there as well, right? So it's important that you look at any news from a holistic standpoint. पूरे से पूरा end to end उस news को समझना है. And that's what I'm saying. You need to understand that news. If you try to mug it up, there is so much to mug up that it will become impossible. So रट्टा नहीं लगाना है, समझना है. समझने से काम होगा. And the same thing goes for your numbers as well. So you talk about your GDP numbers, you talk about various kind of inflation related numbers that come about. So it's very, very important that you keep a track of what's happening there. And once you start keeping track of it, and as I said, if you create that chain of information, it becomes practically impossible for you to forget, right? That's become very, very important. And of course, if you come across any jargon, again, the same logic applies for curiosity quotient. अगर कोई नया term सीखा, to spend time to analyze what that particular term was. So for example, I mean, let's look at it very simply, right? For example, I take the example of Victor Axelsen, right? Now this guy is basically a badminton player, right? And he's basically, if you read the news, it automatically comes in the first line itself that he's a Danish badminton player, and he is the world champion of 2017 and the 2020, or rather technically it got postponed to 2021, so that Olympic champion as well in badminton. But the point is, it's very difficult for us to segregate this information that he's Danish. So Danish ka matlab agar aapko already pata hai, then fantastic. But technically, if I don't know what Danish refers to, then it basically is Denmark, right? And it would really help me to understand this part, right? Because if I don't know what Danish means, then I would definitely look at my curiosity and try to find out what Danish is. And if I found out what Danish is, then it refers to Denmark. So I know the country where he belongs to, right? So I just don't know that he is the Olympic champion in badminton, but I also know the country that he belongs to. That is where the curiosity basically steps in, right? So let's try and move a little further, right? And look at the trends that we have basically seen. For example, when I talk about the SBI clerk as a comparison in terms of what was there in 2020 vis-a-vis what is there in 2021. So let me first explain to you what are the different segments that you see over here, right? So when I say first line, इसका मतलब है कि अगर आपने पहली line उस news की पढ़ ली, if you just read the headline of that particular news, that was good enough, you would have been able to answer the question, right? Now when I say curiosity, it means that आपको थोड़ा सा डेप्थ में जाना पड़ेगा. नाउ आई एम नॉट सेग्रीगेटेड इट कि कितना क्यूरियोसिटी चाहिए, राइट? सो आपको न्यूज के पहले लाइन से आगे बढ़ना पड़ेगा. यू विल हैव टू गो बियॉन्ड द फर्स्ट लाइन इन द न्यूज, राइट? And there will be some questions you'll be able to answer if you just look at the subtext or the next 2 to 3 lines. And of course, there will be some other questions where you'll need to think more in terms of your curiosity, right? So that basically comes in as the next level, wherein आपको थोड़ा curious होके जानने का इच्छा होना चाहिए, and that is where you will be able to figure out more. And there were questions on that level as well. There were questions which were either option based or there were statements given, and you had to basically choose the correct options that fit the bill. Or if it was not statements, it would have been multiple answers given to you, and you have to choose the correct answer in that context, right? So for example, which of these is a FMCG company, which of these is, let's say for example, a public sector bank, so on and so forth. So these are basically option based questions wherein some level of common sense can also help you in answering these questions, because you can look at eliminating options and trying to answer such questions. So these are option driven questions. And of course, if it's going to be statement driven questions, so for example, I talk about e-rupee, right? If a statement based question appears on that front, unless I know everything that is happening from the context of an e-rupee, I may not be able to figure out what exactly is the news, what is the information. So all of those things will not be possible. I'll definitely will not be able to answer any statement related questions. So I need to know the end-to-end aspect of it, right? So similarly, when I talk about an EASE 4.0 and you talk about the EASE 3.0 rankings that got released recently, then you need to be aware of कि EASE 3.0 में rankings क्या थे, EASE 3.0 के बाद EASE 4.0 आ गया है, उसमें क्या क्या पैरामीटर्स इनकॉर्पोरेटेड हैं, और EASE का जो इंडेक्स है उसको कैलकुलेट करने में कितने पैरामीटर्स इन्वॉल्वड हैं. सो ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स आल्सो बिकम वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट? सो दैट इज वेयर द क्यूरियोसिटी कम्स इन, wherein you want to know just a little bit more than what is given in the headlines, right? And again, option based questions through common sense and through various kinds of deeper reading can definitely be achieved. As I said, the devil is in the details, right? So you have to spend time in understanding news rather than just remembering the headlines, right? Now there were very small portion which was off. When I say off, it is either static or current, but it is maybe more than a year old, right? Most of the news that I actually found was basically picked up. Even when I talk about, let's say, when I say first line, it could again be your current affairs or it could be pure static as well. But even the static portion was basically available in some form of news. So the reason for asking that was that वो कहीं ना कहीं आया हुआ था, right? For example, I talk about what is the percentage should a company look at from a CSR perspective, right? In the Companies Act. Now the question is that technically ये आपको लगेगा अरे ये तो static information है, ये कहाँ पे suddenly कहाँ से आ गया? But there was one news pertaining to this in the Press Information Bureau, and it basically talked about this particular news item, and somewhere in March it had basically appeared. So technically जो भी आपका static question भी आ रहा है, it's not as if it is coming out of the blue. There is some news pertaining to that static that is actually relevant, and if you're able to capture that news, automatically वो static portion भी आपका cover हो जाएगा, right? So there are static one-liners that are still coming, but it is related to the current affairs. So जो current में है उसके हिसाब से static भी पूछा जा रहा है. So that is the context, right? Now the next thing is when I say off, it is like way off, as in कुछ उससे related कुछ news भी नहीं आया, and you basically ended up kind of not finding that news item anywhere, or basically it was, let's say, older than a year, those kind of situations, but that percentage was very, very small, right? And then there was one, obviously, this question which I was talking about when I talk about curiosity or the first line, right? For example, when I talk about CSR, right? So corporate social responsibility has been in the news for quite a long time, कहीं ना कहीं आता रहता है. Then आप corporate governance की बात करते हो, उसमें भी आपका corporate social responsibility आ जाता है. So when you're generally reading about these things, CSR gets mentioned somewhere or the other, right? So अगर आपके पास CSR आपके सामने दिखाई दे रहा है आपको, so then automatically the क्यूरियोसिटी शुड राइज, राइट? कि भाई सीएसआर क्या होता है, तो यू वांट टू फाइंड मोर अबाउट इट. सो या तो उस क्यूरियोसिटी के बेसिस पे आप सीएसआर के बारे में ज्यादा फाइंड आउट कर सकते हो, या फिर यू कैन फॉलो whatever is the news sources that are available. So Press Information Bureau mein this information had already appeared, which is where I've given, there was one question which I could classify this CSR as basically a curiosity driven question or also a first line question, because ये news में भी था और आप curiosity से भी ये जानने की कोशिश कर सकते थे, right? So that is the only question which I could classify at either curiosity or first line. But all the other questions, if you see the percentage here, majority of them were still first line questions, right? Wherein you could obviously find that news somewhere or the other that was getting captured, and more importantly, even if it was static, it was basically in the news somewhere or the other, right? That is the angle here. The next aspect to this is that a decent percentage actually came in from a curiosity standpoint as well, which means अगर आपने सिर्फ और सिर्फ basic news पढ़ा होगा, then you will not be able to answer these kind of questions which required an in-depth study of that particular news and understanding of that news, right? Now technically speaking, when you look at the last year's pattern as well, it was also on a similar trend, but the fundamental difference between, let's say, last year and this year is that ये जो curiosity का depth required था, right? When I say curiosity can be at one level, which is like headline से एक line नीचे तक, right? Or maybe 2 to 3 lines नीचे तक, that is basic level curiosity. उतना जान लेना with basic curiosity, right? And when I say depth, it means I'm not only looking at the 2-3 lines of that particular news, but I'm looking at the entire news item, right? So when I get into that kind of a detail, that is the depth that I'm talking about here. So even though the percentage looks as if first liners were more in this case, but the depth at which the curiosity level questions were asked this year, it was significantly deeper. Which means आप सिर्फ एक या 2 लाइन्स हेडलाइन के बाद पढ़ने से आपका काम नहीं होने वाला था, आपको और ज्यादा डिटेल में पढ़ना था. So that is where the point is. So while curiosity was there even last year, the depth of the curiosity required this year was significantly higher, right? Now moving on to the next trend which I want to talk about, which basically is your SBI PO when I look at the exam paper last year, right? Again, a significant portion of questions were definitely first line. There were a lot of curiosity based questions as well, right? And some option based questions were also there, and a very small portion can be called as off, wherein it could be either static or current, but there was no necessary news item that was there, so usme correlation kam mil paya. So which means that all the other major chunk that was there already had some reference in some kind of news or the other, which meant that अगर आप ढंग से news को properly follow करोगे एक process methodology के साथ, you will be able to crack it, right? And if you look at the split overall also in terms of let's say a BAFA or a GA kind of a split, then you had around 55% of it appearing from a banking or a financial awareness, which is a significant number, and that obviously highlights to you how important banking and financial awareness or economic awareness is from the perspective of, let's say, an SBI or even an IBPS, right? And obviously general awareness also had a weightage. Now point is, it's almost equal, but BAFA or economic awareness has a decent amount of weightage overall as well. Now the other thing to look at is from an IBPS perspective, and if you see the trend here as well, so obviously the first line questions were slightly more in this case. If you go back, you see that the percentage of first line in terms of SBI was around 47 and 41 for curiosity. In case of IBPS, the first liners were a lot more, which means that it was a slightly more easier this thing. And secondly, when you look at the curiosity aspect also, which shows that there are 37% questions that were there from a curiosity perspective also. But the trends look pretty similar in the sense that obviously IBPS PO was probably a little easier than SBI PO in that sense. But there is a catch here, right? So while this number in terms of difference, this looks at 60, and the one-liners here look at 47% overall. But if you look at another aspect, which is the curiosity side of things, right, that is where it becomes very important for you to understand. So when I say first line, it is literally the first line, right? So when I say curiosity, it could mean two things, right? It could be the first 2-3 lines of the news, or it could be the entire news, right? So this is where the catch is. So in terms of IBPS exam, what happened was that this curiosity type questions, basically you would have been able to answer if you had just looked at maybe 2 to 3 lines beyond the actual news itself, and you would be able to answer. But unlike that, in case of SBI PO, the curiosity needed was much deeper, which means that unless you read the entire news fully, or at least had that curiosity to know more about that particular news, you would have struggled to answer these questions. So which is where IBPS turned out to be a bit easier. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that the depth of knowledge that is being expected of you, right? So the depth of knowledge has definitely increased. It's not going to be easy, and if you're just going to try to mug up things, you will not remember. So it's important that you put a process in place, enjoy the process, and more importantly, be consistent in terms of your overall approach, and try to understand things, make your short notes rather than mugging things up. So that's going to become very crucial. Now, for example, when I talk about your SBI PO itself, there were questions like basically highlighting what is the O of NOFHC. Now, NOFHC has been in the news for quite some time, right? But unless you had the curiosity to know what exactly did NOFHC stand for, हर जगह पे NOFHC दिख रहा है, बट आप उसको समझने की कोशिश ही नहीं कर रहे हो, तो फिर आपको कहाँ से मिलेगा इन्फॉर्मेशन, राइट? So unless I basically have that curiosity to find out कि यार ये NOFHC होता क्या, नॉन ऑपरेटिव फाइनेंशियल होल्डिंग कंपनी होता है, unless I have that curiosity, I would probably not spend time on this. So which is where the curiosity becomes important in this case. Then you basically talk about, let's say, what is QIP? So it talks about qualified institutional placement. Then there is Griha, so talking about green rating for integrated habitat assessment. So the point is, when you're coming across any term, if you don't understand it, you have to apply that curiosity quotient and try to understand that term. That becomes very important. So it's more about awareness, about understanding rather than just mugging up. That becomes crucial. Now, again, drawing parallels with IBPS and trying to make you understand कि दोनों में actually difference क्या था. So the kind of questions, for example, here would be that you basically talk about who's the CEO of Tesla. Right, so any kind of news that you would have come across Tesla, then just a first level reading of it would tell you that basically the founder is Elon Musk, or the CEO is Elon Musk. So that's not much there. Similarly, any news that you would have come across RRBs, you'd probably need to spend some time into figuring out as to what is the holding of the central government in your RRBs. So that basically is at a 50%. Right. So the thing is that when it came to IBPS, the question answers were a little easier in that sense, wherein you didn't have to spend maybe, let's say, additionally 2 to 3 minutes in answering those questions. But if you look at last year's SBI PO trend, that obviously required you to understand things in a lot of detail, right? So the kind of thing that is required right now of you is very simple, right? So the first thing that I'm looking at is how do we proceed from here, right? First thing, you have static general awareness, right? But whatever static also that gets asked, at least the majority of it that gets asked, is basically related to something that has happened in the current affairs, right? So agar aap properly news track kar rahe ho, if you're tracking news effectively, then you should be able to capture this very easily. That becomes very crucial. For example, I'll again give you a very simple example itself, right? So for example, if you've been following up what is happening from the fintech movement standpoint, right, from an RBI perspective, you know that which is the first cohort, which is the second cohort, and now we are talking about the third cohort in terms of fintech payments itself, right? So there are a lot of things that have happened from that front. Just had to basically track the news. Or even if you get any questions around wildlife sanctuaries or anything, there would have been something that has happened with that wildlife sanctuary in some kind of related news, and if you had followed that news, you would have been able to answer that wildlife sanctuary related question also very easily. I'm just giving an example there. Then, of course, I mean, whenever you talk about things like, let's say, anyone from the context of, let's say, Kailash Satyarthi, right? Or you talked about Muhammad Yunus, he was also in the news. and then you basically talk about, let's say, Amartya Sen, right? So all these guys keep giving some information or some tidbits about or their viewpoints on something that is happening in the society, right? So they are continuously in the news. Now the point is, it's your curiosity to find out, and whenever you read news about them, it also says that Nobel laureate so and so, Nobel laureate so and so, or Padma Shri so and so. So it kind of mentions the award that they've also received as well. So it all boils down to whether you have the curiosity to figure out, अच्छा यार Nobel laureate था, इसने क्या किया था life में, मतलब what exactly did he do in his life, why did he win the Nobel Prize, or which year did he win the Nobel Prize, or talking about what is the other work that he has done. He has written some book called as Argumentative Indian as well. So what is the other things that they've done? So if you bring that curiosity into your day-to-day life, automatically you'll be able to answer all of these questions quite easily. Similarly, we talk about a very simple term called recurve. Right, so this is basically a kind of a bow in archery, wherein the basically the bow is like this, right, and this portion is basically bent away from the string. So obviously what happens is, when you actually try to pull the string downwards, it automatically gives some additional energy here, and the arrow actually goes faster, right? It basically is able to store energy. So that is the context of a recurve. A very simple question was asked as to recurve belongs to which particular sport, and archery was the answer in this case. Now again, this could have gone from a curiosity standpoint as to you try to understand what recurve is, or even if you follow the news in day-to-day life, you'll find out that the recurve archery team in India did so and so or achieved so and so. It automatically gets covered in the news as well. So curiosity can also help you achieve things, and the bigger part is curiosity improves or adds to your knowledge, which can actually come in handy at any point in life. That is where the curiosity angle comes into the picture, right? So static GA bhi aata hai, but it is usually related to the current affairs. So I've given you some examples as to how things can be correlated. Next thing I want to talk about is basically, when I talk about economic awareness, financial awareness, banking awareness, what exactly am I talking about? You need to have basic understanding of what are the BESEL norms, which are the 3 norms that are there, 1, 2 and 3, what are the parameters in them. All that becomes important, and the related aspect of it will obviously be your prompt corrective action framework kya hai, what are the parameters that are there, right, and कितने ratios maintain होने चाहिए. उसी context में आपका आ जाता है non performing assets also, right? All these things become important in that perspective. And again, when I talk about BESEL norms, you also have your CAMELS ratings and so on. So these things also become relevant from that perspective. Then आप capital markets की बात करते हो. Capital markets में obviously आपका equity यानी कि stock market, and then debt, which obviously talks about the different markets that are there from that perspective. So आप government securities की market की बात करते हो, आप commercial papers की बात करते हो, उसमें rated regulations क्या क्या हैं. So all those things are from the debt market perspective, right? Securities market basically, and then equity आपका जो stock market में हो रहा है वो वाला action. So all these also become important. Then foreign trade के perspective में क्या चल रहा है, India का FX level कितना है, what is the overall levels in terms of that. And then I say GDP plus, you're looking at national income. Then you're talking about GDP, GNP, things like your balance of payments, and a lot of other important reserves as well, right? So abhi currently in the context of GDP plus and foreign trade, you can also talk about your special drawing rights. So all these things also become important. So this is information that you should be aware of, right? So ये सब पता होना चाहिए कितना है, क्या level है, GDP के हिसाब से इंडिया का rating क्या है. All of those things become very important. And again, a lot of information keeps getting shared through various reports. You've got to keep track of a lot of these things. But the point is, जब तक इसके फंडे क्लियर नहीं होंगे, तब तक आप उस न्यूज़ को भी अच्छे से फॉलो नहीं कर पाओगे, which is where it's important to read these kind of news and start following from Google या any other sources as to what exactly do they mean. And of course, if you have any doubt, you can always reach out to us and we'll be happy to help. Similarly, when you talk about inflation क्या है, inflation targeting क्या है, different types of inflation क्या हो सकते हैं, all those become very relevant, right? Then we talk about your money markets as well, your call money, term money, notice money, and money market में action क्या चल रहा है. All of these things become important, right? So how is the money circulation being controlled by the RBI, and monetary policy में क्या RBI decisions लेता है. So when I say how RBI is controlling, in the sense कि RBI के पास क्या tools हैं, आप बोलो LAF की बात करो, आप बोलो repo, reverse repo, right? Then you talk about things like your marginal standing facility. Then you talk about your MSS, which is your market stabilization scheme. So so many instruments like your OMO. Then अभी recently आपका TL, TRO की बात चल रही है. So all this becomes also equally relevant and important for you guys to understand. Then Operation Twist. Right, so there are so many such information that keeps appearing, right? And it's important that you guys are aware of what all of these are. And again, without any doubt, यूनियन बजट में क्या क्या कवर हो रहा है, ऑल ऑफ दोज एस्पेक्ट्स बिकम वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. एंड देन वेज एंड मीन्स एडवांसेस, गवर्नमेंट के बोरोइंग के हिसाब से गवर्नमेंट का बोरोइंग कैलेंडर क्या है, हाउ इज द आरबीआई सपोर्टिंग द गवर्नमेंट फ्रॉम दैट पर्सपेक्टिव. ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स आर बेसिकली फंडामेंटल थिंग्स जो आपको इकोनॉमिक अवेयर्स, फाइनेंशियल अवेयरनेस या जनरल अवेयरनेस के पर्सपेक्टिव में पता होने चाहिए, राइट. नेक्स्ट अप दैट आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट इज द सोर्सेस, राइट. सो ऑफ कोर्स बेसिक सोर्स इज आरबीआई सर्कुलर. इट कम्स विद अ लॉट ऑफ इन्फॉर्मेशन. आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि हर एक चीज इसमें पता होनी चाहिए, बट एटलीस्ट ऊपर ऊपर पता होना चाहिए कि बॉस क्या क्या है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अभी प्रीपेड इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स रिलेटेड एक सर्कुलर आया था. तो व्हेन आई टॉक अबाउट प्रीपेड इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स, करेंटली the types of prepaid instruments have changed. Earlier it used to be different forms that used to be there, but now it's basically just your small PPIs and your full scale PPIs essentially. So how has PPIs been evolved? वो उस टाइप के basic information आपको पता होना चाहिए. So I'm not saying completely go through the entire circular, but relevant information, quick information from that has to be captured. Similarly, PIB is a definitely important source which carries a lot of valuable information. So that is something that you can definitely track. Then you talk about any kind of financial daily. Yeah, it could be a live mint, it could be a business line, or it could be economic times, whatever you want to follow. Any one financial daily that has to be tracked online, and then any national daily as well, so that you look at the news away from financial awareness as well. So that is something again a national daily will help you with. The other thing is, for example, a very simple case is that in one of the scenarios, basically there was a question in one of the exams talked about NIRVIC. Right now, the point is NIRVIC is something which is relevant from the context of the insurance sector, and it basically is related to the export promotion and how you're basically ensuring things are happening from a promotion standpoint for exports as well. But there are two ways to look at it, right? One, if you've been following news related to foreign trade, you would have been able to figure out that there is something called as NIRVIC because it is constantly in the news, right? The other way to look at it is if you had basically just followed the news or the announcements that was there on the SBI ka website, right? There also NIRVIC was very clearly mentioned in one of the news. So any exam that you're taking, be it SBI, be it RBI, right, try to follow the news items or the announcements that is there on the website of the recruiter as well, right? So that also gives you a very credible source of information जहाँ से possibly कुछ general awareness या current awareness related questions आ सकते हैं, right? So that again becomes very important. Next up, when you're talking about current affairs, you're talking about people firstly. So people के perspective में क्या, who are the new people that have been appointed, who are the people who've basically either passed away or have retired from their posts, और in that context in retirements के केस में किस किस का extension हुआ है, वो सब भी important हो जाता है. What are the awards that have been given? Then you're looking at various kinds of national news, international news as well. And then from a perspective of what do you say, your financial and banking awareness, you talk about things like your mergers and acquisitions, latest launches by different companies or different banks that have happened, where are the different kinds of partnerships that have happened in the space. So all of these become important, relevant information that you should try and get that captured. And the next thing is that you have a lot of data-based inputs also that are required from time to time. There are a lot of reports that keep appearing. There are a lot of indexes that keep getting published. You need to be aware of the latest numbers from these perspectives as well. So not just what is the number from an index standpoint, usme India ka rank kya hai, if it is a global index, what is India's rank, some of the countries above it, below it, all that actually helps. And coverage of reports also, at least from perspective of knowing what that report was. So those things also become very important, right? So that is some of the essential stuff that I would want you guys to keep in mind when you're looking at your preparation. To sum it up, basically, what I wanted to again highlight to you guys is that if you look at this overall picture, it's important not to panic. There is a lot to read, right? But again, I'll boil down to the why again. Why are you reading? Not just to crack the GA of the exam that you're taking, but also to improve your knowledge, improve your understanding, because that's going to help you in the next stage as well, which is your, personality development round, which is also going to be equally tough. So when you actually start preparing right now, that stage becomes that much more easier for you. And if you inculcate or make general awareness as a part of your DNA in life, then you're going to get immense benefits from it. As I said to you earlier as well, that it's going to hugely boost your confidence levels and you'll be able to achieve great things in life. If you just inculcate that curiosity quotient in your life, आप आगे बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ सकते हो लाइफ में. So the CQ becomes very, very important. And as I said, consistency, right? Putting a process in place. Once that process is in place, enjoying that process and sticking to it, revising as and when time permits, making your own short notes in the entire process, right? And understanding that it is important to understand. राइट? जितना जल्दी ये आप समझेंगे उतना आपके लिए बेटर है, क्योंकि न्यूज़ को रट्टा नहीं मारना है, न्यूज़ को समझना है. Once you understand news, you will realize that a lot of these things will automatically become a lot easier for you. Once you understand news, you will start enjoying this also, right? So those things become very, very important. And then that question that was posed in the beginning when I said, कुछ भी पूछ लेते हैं. If you prepare in this way, कुछ भी पूछ लो यार, हम तो तैयार ही हैं, right? Ask me anything, I'm ready. So that is the kind of preparation, that is the kind of confidence that is required. And trust me, ये possible है, definitely possible hai, and not at the expense of the other subjects. They can continue in terms of your preparation. Every 5 minutes that you get in between, those breaks that you take, right? Take breaks from social media, away from social media, and spend that additional 5 minutes on reading one particular news item. Even if you give those 5 minutes every day, you'll be able to gather enough such 5 minutes throughout the day, wherein you would be able to spend enough time on general awareness. Time is precious, and if you utilize that time effectively, trust me, these results are possible. So if you prepare with this kind of sincerity, with this kind of enjoyment, with this kind of consistency, then automatically that question of they can ask anything can move to ask me anything and I can answer, right? So basically जो transition है आपका from कुछ भी पूछ लेते हैं to कुछ भी पूछ लो can happen अगर आप sincerely कंसिस्टेंसी के साथ एफर्ट डालें और आप बेसिकली अपने पूरे प्रोसेस को एंजॉय करें, then this result is definitely possible, right? So guys, this is the holy grail in terms of how you need to prepare in terms of all the upcoming exams that are coming your way. And as I said, it's not going to help you achieve the short goal of cracking the exam, but if you do this sincerely, your confidence levels will improve and you'll be able to crack your interviews also brilliantly, right? And of course this is a process, and once इसकी लत लग गई ना एक बार कि आप इसको सीखना शुरू किए, आप जनरल अवेयरनेस में घुस गए एक बार, so automatically आपके लाइफ में it will become a part of your life, and automatically your confidence levels will keep soaring higher and higher, and you'll be able to achieve great things in life. So curiosity quotient अपने साथ हमेशा रखिए. जितना ज़्यादा आपका CQ है उतना आपका करियर में ग्रोथ ऊपर ऊपर होता जाएगा. याद रखिए, आपको ट्रांजिशन करना है फ्रॉम कुछ भी पूछ लेते हैं टू कुछ भी पूछ लो, एंड ये प्रोसेस उसके लिए बहुत हेल्प करेगा. दिस प्रोसेस विल रियली हेल्प यू इन दैट, एंड मोर इम्पॉर्टेंटली keep putting in the effort in terms of what I've explained in this particular session, and it will go in the right direction. We will also keep trying to do any things that are possible from our side on YouTube as well, but it's important for you to stick to this process, enjoy it, and follow this consistently, and results will be there for you to see. So on that note, this is Ravi signing off. I look forward to seeing you in the next session with some more interesting concepts, some more interesting fundamentals. Until then, have a great day and a wonderful week ahead. See you guys.